Welcome to Under the Microscope, your go-to podcast for materials and nanoscience. I'm your host, Dr. Pranoti Ksirsagar. Together on this podcast, we explore the fascinating world of nanoscience, where the smallest discoveries make the biggest impact. With each episode, I introduce you to a scientist working in the field of materials and nanoscience. Make sure that you are hitting that follow button on your favorite podcast app. And if you're watching on YouTube, yes, the video of this podcast goes on the YouTube channel of the Science Talk. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button. There are multiple different ways of showing your support for the podcast, and subscribing and following or even leaving a review is the most easiest and the most convenient thing for you to do. I'm also going to put the link to the newsletter of the Science Talk, which you can also sign up for if you're interested. All of these links that I'm mentioning are in the show notes and the episode description. All right, without further delay, let's get into today's episode. Hi everyone, my name is Pranoti. I'm your host of Under the Microscope podcast, and today we have with us the next QuanTour Hero from the Netherlands. Let me introduce you to Wolfgang Löffler, who is a professor at the Leiden Institute of Physics, and he will also be hosting the QuanTour light source, which is the quantum light source, and we will talk about his research, his career journey, and all of that good stuff. So please join me in welcoming Wolfgang. Nice to have you here. How are you?
Good. Hi. Thanks for having me.
It's so lovely to have you. I'm going to ask you so many questions. So let's start by understanding your research first. So can you please explain your research to us in super simple words?
That is probably a little bit hard since we're doing fundamental research. Try to advance the understanding of light and matter and how these two interact on the quantum level. So very nicely fitting to the QuanTour, this involves lots of single photons, sometimes entangled photons, quantum entangled photons, and nanoscale material systems such as a quantum dot, where also quantum mechanics shows up. And next to fundamental research, we explore also future applications, such as for quantum networks and quantum computing. Also try to move towards spectroscopies with these new kinds of light that we are making. And we love to explore sidetracks every day. And for instance, we have experiments running to explore the limits of human vision, if we can see single photons.
Wait. So many questions. What do you mean by human vision? Do you mean that I, as a person, can see the single photons with my naked eyes?
Probably. I don't know. We have to drop by in our labs and do experiments and do tests. To zoom a little bit out, this question is, of course, as old as the invention of the photon, or that physicists discovered that we need to have a smallest particle of light fields, which you call photon. It has a very low energy. It is, you can imagine, if you have a starry night, but otherwise it's completely dark, your eye receives approximately 1 million photons per second. And what we try to figure out is if one photon only, a green photon, because this is where our eye is most sensitive in the night, whether we can see this consciously. And consciously means that you say, I've seen it. You can imagine already that we need to make many trials for this and do very proper statistics. And this is also the issue why there are some amazing studies starting 100 years ago. But the statistics are not very significant. And so we try to combine our expertise in quantum optics, and we work together with cognitive neuroscientists in order to answer this question in the future, probably.
What? Okay. I thought we are going to talk only about the fundamental physics, and now we are combining with the cognitive neuroscience. And oh, wow. Okay, so a human eye is receiving, when I look up the sky and the starry light, you mentioned that we are receiving thousands of photons.
or millions even. So at the darkest night, you can imagine, then it's still a million, but it is very well known in biomicroscopies that a single molecule that is absorbing light, this works on the single photon level, because nowadays in biology, in medicine, all these beautiful microscopic pictures of cells are basically made by observing one photon after another. Now, that's an amazing application of quantum optics that has come up in the past 10, 20 years or so. And yeah, as you say, usually I'm paid to do fundamental research with solid state systems that are actually a little bit poisonous even to handle, but we love to explore these sidetracks. And since we have this experience with single photons, we can measure them, we can calibrate our setups very well. And we know also math, we know statistics, and therefore we try to explore sidetracks. And because this is also not only a fundamental questions, my friends in neuroscience tell me that actually being able to do these experiments might be useful for neuroscientific questions. And therefore, I like to work on this.
I have to visit your lab now. I have to. I have to. Okay, I will ask you more questions about this when I'm actually visiting your lab, but let me ask you a few questions about the fundamental physics on the quantum level, the light and matter interaction. So far, with the QuanTour project, we have had gallium arsenide quantum dots, which are relaxed and stressed. We have also had boron nitride with the potential of them going to, or rather functioning in space, because boron nitride can basically function quite well, I think, at the room temperature. You don't need super cold temperatures. And we have also had entangled photons description for quantum security, quantum communication, secure quantum communication. And also we have had the site control quantum dots. So the fabrication of the quantum dots and the applications of the quantum dots, or rather the quantum technology, so to say. So where does your research fit in with this QuanTour features that I've had on Under the Microscope? I'm trying to understand, where does your research fit in?
Actually, we're doing very similar research as the researchers who made the single photon source that is traveling through Europe. And we are investigating the same quantum dots, for instance, which was actually indium gallium arsenide quantum dots grown on gallium arsenide. And so in these molecular beam epitaxy systems that require the cleanest vacuum on Earth possible. And so we are investigating here in my group exactly the same quantum dots. We put them in slightly different optical microcavities where we can lock up the light so that the interaction between light and the quantum dot gets better, or we collect the photons from the quantum dot in a better way. But this cavity that will travel to us, that is used for the quantum dot of the QuanTour quantum dot, this is also very interesting. But there are different variations of the field, and we are investigating we call it a monolithic integrated cavity structure that is based actually on methods borrowed from laser physics, because these quantum dots have also real-world applications in communications, because it turns out to make ultra-fast communications quantum dot lasers. So lasers built on many quantum dots, not one, like we will get from you soon, but many millions of quantum dots. They make the fastest lasers for communications.
Correct. Okay. So do you also do the fabrication of, because I'm a material scientist, right? For me, it's also interesting. Do you do fabrication of the quantum dots and the optical measurements? Or do you then collaborate with groups who are doing the fabrication of these cavity or the bullseye structure of the indium gallium arsenide quantum dots?
We are in Leiden not fabricating the structures ourselves, and we are collaborating with a number of groups starting from Santa Barbara to groups in Europe. But we are also exploring commercial sources of them, because these machines need to make them, they need to be really extremely clean. And that is something, it's better, I would say, if people team up And this is usually done in a commercial enterprise in order to get simply the best devices. Sometimes developing things in your own lab, you can reach a certain level of precision or accuracy, but by teaming up many people, which, for instance, also in beautiful international large-scale projects from CERN to LIGO or other projects, this gives results in even better research results.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, that's the whole point, or that's right, the beauty of science or the collaboration in science, right? That you join forces, you don't have to work in silos. It's just better if you work together, because then you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And also, it saves time. It's more fun to work with other groups as well. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
It saves money.
Oh, definitely.
That is also an important point.
Yeah, it saves money, it saves resources, it saves everything. It's just efficient in all different kinds of ways. And it's also should be encouraged, or rather recognized and rewarded by funding agencies, probably. We are going to spend the money that you are giving us, or when you will give us, more efficiently and in the best efficient way possible, so that we are not reinventing the wheel. But yeah, we will come to that later on. With the funding agencies and stuff, we will come to that. This is super interesting, and I'm going to continue asking questions. I feel like I have to visit your lab and spend time with your group and with you for more than a week to get the full understanding of all the different kinds of amazing work that you're doing. Let's travel maybe a bit back in time now and understand your career journey so far, because every scientist, I feel, has a different career path and career journey and the steps that they have taken. I don't know if the 10-year-old Wolfgang was like, I'm going to be a professor in the Netherlands and quantum science and all kinds of good stuff. So please tell us about your career journey. How did you end up being a professor now at the University of Leiden, or the Institute of Physics at University of Leiden?
Yeah, actually, this is relatively simple, because we can use one of Europe's largest rivers to sketch my journey. I was born in Ludwigshafen am Rhein, so the river Rhine is flowing along Ludwigshafen, and I studied then in Karlsruhe, which is a little bit upstream, 100 kilometers. And I always was drawn to sciences, but whether it was physics or chemistry, that was never clear. But then somehow it turned out to become physics in Karlsruhe, and I had great fun there. Did also do my PhD research in Karlsruhe. Actually, very similar systems. So I was working with quantum dots in Karlsruhe, and at that time we made already electrically driven single photon sources. But it was quite harder at that time, because the technology wasn't so advanced as it is right now. And I remember that I wanted to do nothing with cryostats, so not at very low temperatures, but I wanted to work at room temperature afterwards. And I turned towards photonic quantum information, what I wanted to go. So I was looking on the map. I wanted to stay in Europe, I was working on the map, and I wanted to go close to the coast, close to the beach, and to personal reasons also. And then if you look, I want to do experimental research. There are not so many places where you can do that. And Leiden was one of them. Of course, I haven't heard much about Leiden before, except for the historical lectures about that Einstein, Ehrenfest, and many other foundational fathers of physics were often present in Leiden. But about present-day research, not so much. And then I found a quantum optics group here. And they were doing something amazing I never heard about, which is that investigating quantum optics with singularities in light fields. So like vortices, like a whirlwind in light fields. And this was very exciting. And so I went to Leiden to learn this. And I think I did learn this quite well, quite quickly. And then I was doing here my own independent research for some time. And then I was very lucky that by year-long, very hard work, at a certain point, I obtained a staff position in Leiden. And so I didn't move further away, but I continued then my career in Leiden. And I changed research fields several times in Leiden. And so currently, one of my main research lines of my group is oriented along the little quantum dots again.
And how do you feel about the cryostats today?
They are easier than an espresso machine. So they cost a lot more, of course, but I must say my espresso machine at home is more complicated to operate than the cryostats in our labs. This is a switcher button and it gets cold. And like we had, for instance, which is very rare, but a power outage. So we switched on things this morning and it was very easy. So my group members, probably they don't know how much more easier their life is compared to what I was doing during my PhD in pouring around liquid helium and cryostats. And every day I called at that time my cryostats a Tamagotchi, which you have to take care of every day. And nowadays it's much easier.
Yeah, it's more streamlined. I remember that because when I was doing my master's at the Max Planck in Stuttgart, we also had our group was also doing cryo measurements, and this was in 2013, 14, something around that time. And they would be carrying around the helium cylinders, huge cylinders. And then I also remember that you are not allowed to travel with the helium, liquid helium, in the elevator together. So you have to press the button, take it from the basement usually to, I don't know, 4th floor or wherever you are. And then you climb up the stairs, and then suddenly on the 4th floor, the elevator opens. And if you haven't caught up, people are just like, there is just a cylinder. What's happening here? But since then, I think we have come very far now with the cryostats. It is the push of the button. But that's also good, right? Because then the researcher can focus or spend time on doing the measurements and doing the data analysis and all of that instead of waiting for the cryostat to cool down.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, fundamental research is part of a very important cycle between technology development. Our research will enable future technologies, but present-day technologies also always improve our research. There are a couple of milestones in this field, like, for instance, the CCD camera that made 1,000 measurements instantaneously possible. Before that, you had to measure with only single pixel detectors, and then you had 1,000 pixels. That is 1,000 times faster. And it was also liquid helium, as you mentioned it, which is also a little bit sad, because probably you know that in Leiden is a place where for the first time helium was liquefied more than 100 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And now we are having less and less liquid helium here around, since we have these easy cooling machines available.
That's quite interesting. I did not know that. I'm always curious about how did you decide to pursue science? Was this something that was when you were in school, that you were inclined more towards the sciences or natural sciences with physics and chemistry? Or did you come from an academic family?
Yes, I must admit that I have quite some scientific background in my family. And so this makes it, of course, easier as a kid also to get more in contact with sciences. But because I realized this, I'm trying to work towards enabling realization of science ideas of kids and school kids and more adult kids who don't have this background, because I think this is for society a major challenge, that we enable all possibilities for all people. And so I host regularly school kids with whom I do research projects. They can do something in my labs. Sometimes I'm a bit afraid about safety, but we manage with this because everybody is curious. We just have sometimes to pull it out of people.
Yeah, definitely. We need to have as many first generation scientists, because then there is just more and more brilliant minds coming into research and also working on the future or emerging technologies and fundamental science. Speaking of fun experiments, I'm going to ask you the next question, which I do get a lot of slack from the guests, because I'm going to ask you to pick one research project that you are most proud of and explaining it to us in simple words in the section we call In Other Words. Don't hate me.
So there is a variety of projects and results which made me happy for some time, which made me think about it, and I was happy to discover new things. And you might know that this is actually sometimes for theorists easier because we have to deal with all our problems in the lab. But to mention one experiment, this is as we did something which sometimes they say is the most crazy experiment that we did, but it simulated so much research what we're doing right now, and that is we first made a whole lot of effort to make single photons. So for this, we use our quantum dot, and we excite it with a laser, so a classical light source. And now, I need briefly to go a little bit back, and the classical light source consists not only of single photons. I guess you might have heard that in this context, in this QuanTour context before, but classical light actually consists, if you slice it up in packages, it consists of a random number of photons. And so this is why our quantum light source, which is on the QuanTour, is so amazing, because we can produce only one photon per slot that we want to have it. Okay, so we made that. We also spent 10 years in order to improving our single photon source. Then we made it, and then we were thinking, can we make, again, classical light out of this? So we are thinking, can we synthesize light? Now that is, of course, we're not the first one thinking about this direction, but probably even after all the efforts of making single photons, not many people still have the energy to think about to make, again, classical light of this. And so we came up with a very simple optical setup consisting just of a beam splitter and a few mirrors, which by some beautiful quantum optics effects produces states of light that contain, again, a random number of photons in every slot. And so we made that, we characterized it, we made theoretical models, which turned out to be really challenging. And then we could compare our experimental data. And then in the end, we were confident enough that we can draw the conclusion that we made this classical coherent light, laser light, from scratch. And that made us really think in many directions, what else can we do with this? And we're still going on with this currently as we speak. Now, because it combines so many questions and raises so many new questions, this is one of my currently favorite research results.
Okay, I understand. This is super cool. I understand why you picked this as one of the favorite ones. Questions. Why is it difficult to, or rather, let me rephrase it so that to make sure I understand it correctly. You made light from scratch, so there was no light, there was just dark. In the lab, through the magic, I'm putting it in quotes, suddenly there was light.
No, we fed it with single photons. We made single photons, and these we inserted into an experiment, which then, as you say, it reshaped the photon statistics such that what comes out is much more like a laser pointer light.
Oh, so this was the reverse of what you explained in your current research, where you're doing like, okay, our eyes are receiving millions of photons in a dark night, and there you're trying to isolate and cognitively recognize probably that we have isolated one, like a green light or whatever. Okay.
We made the single photons, and then what we needed to do is we needed to make quantum interference between different photons. And by this quantum interference, we also created quantum entanglement between the photons. And this was actually, from the funding agency point of view, the motivation why we do this. We obviously need to apply for research money, and this was a big, beautiful project that was working towards large photonic entangled states. Probably you had heard about this in the QuanTour before from some of our partners. And therefore, as a sidetrack, we always try to discover new fundamental things. And this is one of these things. By working towards a vision which is a little bit applied, I mean, it's towards photonic quantum computers, and this makes us discover new physics. Also why having a little bit an applied motivation in research is not bad necessarily. It can really new insights, new discoveries. This interplay is totally fine, I think.
Yeah, definitely. This is so cool. This is so cool. So when I visit your lab, because that's happening, will I be able to see this in real life where you have the single photon and then suddenly, I'm putting suddenly in quotes, there is a green light or whatsoever?
Oh, no, so we don't change the color. That is probably a misunderstanding, but it's still what usually where our single photons are is in the just not visible near infrared, as we call it. But we are having also experiments here ongoing where we use actually quantum dot which emit green light. So this we can also do.
Okay.
But the best single photons, and this is why the QuanTour source is also in this near infrared. Currently, simply the best single photons, they are not visible. That is how it is.
Yeah, they exist, but they're not visible. But you're already working on a project with the neuroscientist, cognitive neuroscientist. So next time when you come on the podcast, because you're definitely coming again on the podcast, I'm going to ask you more questions about this particular project that you're like, oh, how is that going? Oh, wow. This is light from scratch. This is so cool. This is just so cool. It's so cool. Wow. Wow. Okay. And you also mentioned that, of course, you work with a lot of different groups and like you made it work. This is really cool. Wolfgang, I have the feeling that you love the research aspect of being a scientist or being a professor, but especially now as you are a professor, there is more to you as a scientist than only the research, right? What else do you like about being a scientist?
Working with great people every day. That was on exciting questions. It's quite diverse. I would say that is, on one hand, of course, the research part. Yeah? That is, I think I know that I'm very lucky also that I could realize this, because there are not many positions in this job, and we are spending on this research, of course, taxpayers' money which tell me every day, and therefore we need to make the best out of that, of course. But it's also good for economy, for the future technological development. Humanity now knows, and there's even proof that research is important to continue on this exciting path of 8 billion people, feeding 8 billion people, but also making new discoveries which make our life better, like computers and things. But I wouldn't be so happy if I wouldn't also have to do actually education. So giving lectures, but also, as I mentioned before, education on all levels, from high school kids to actually retired people sometimes, because education is something where you really check, the people check you, have you really understood it? Mm-hmm. And this is, so in discussions, what you usually then end up in lectures or other discussion places, other forums. Mm-hmm. And then I really understand or see if I understood scientific topics. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's also connected to this part is also that we also need to communicate our science, like I'm a little bit doing here, but many other places where this is important. And so this combination is great fun. There's this technology, I think there is a circle between fundamental research and giving lectures at the university. Because as I mentioned, you understand if you really understood something only by giving lectures, but you can only also give really exciting lectures and motivate people to think about it if you're also up to date with the cutting edge research. So this is indivisible, I would say.
Definitely. You have to be on your toes. You have to know, because the undergrads or graduate students or even school kids in some cases, they will ask you questions like, is this really happening? Or they ask you questions because they see it in a completely different perspective. So this is a good test of your knowledge as well. Like, oh, I haven't thought about it. It's also interesting that you mentioned that, I mean, of course, working with great people, collaborators and project partners, and this is always great, but also the education aspect or dissemination aspect that goes from high school or rather school kids to even retired folks. So general public plus the budding scientists or emerging scientists, and then also combining the fundamental research and the emerging technologies or future technologies, they work together. So there is just so much definitely keeps you in science. I see that. And from what keeps you in science to what barely keeps you in science, if you had 3 wishes to improve your research experience, what would you ask for? And I'm not promising anything here.
This would be great if she could make the deal here, of course. Also, I think I'm actually pretty happy that I'm also nicely embedded in the institute, by the way, which I haven't yet talked about, because there's also a management aspect, of course, of being a scientist. I do not only have to manage me and my group of around 10 people, and all the cryostats and all the hardware, but also a university has to be run, and this is also great fun to do. But anyway, of course, due to all of the things which one needs to do at such a position, which I have, there's one thing which I'm running short, which is time. And this would be of course, the most important thing if the day would have 48 hours or something like that. But still, I think I'm extremely happy about this, and I know there's not much that can be done about that. And there's, of course, always also things connected, like for everybody, no matter in which job you're working, and that is about the security of a job and the funding in my way that I can continue hiring good people to work with me on problems. And this is so-called science funding. And there's pretty much proof that it pays back. And people say every euro invested into even fundamental research, where not tomorrow is an application, but probably in 10 to 100 years, that mainly probably by the education we are providing, the extremely high-level education. I mean, it's hard to work with me, of course, that this will pay back 6 to 10 times. That is what the conventional wisdom is about this. And but despite this, we are a little bit short on funding. So we have to do quite some efforts to write proposals, come up with new ideas, and this quite often. And this, of course, also costs time. But it also makes me think, what do I really want to do? So I always try to find the positive aspects of also seemingly annoying things.
That's quite interesting. So you mentioned time, also the management duties, of course, that you have. That is also something that we didn't really have a lot of time to go into. But it's quite also interesting, right? Because as you progress in your career, there is more and more responsibility that is coming in addition to the science. And that then goes into influencing or building or rebuilding the foundations of science, be it through funding, be it through contracts, be it through, I think most of it comes down to funding. So then keeping like equipment to the best cutting edge level as possible. So not just buying the equipment, but also maintaining the equipment, which also costs a lot of money. So more time is what you would like, probably with your group, in addition to with your institute that you're running as well, together with your team. Better funding?
Better funding we had already.
Better funding, and do you have a third one?
Kind of, it's a little bit hard to come up with one unique aspect there, and because many things are connected to either or in a way, and so probably it's also as a sign that they're doing pretty well. I have to even have to leave it with these, and Yeah, I think so. So more single photons, of course, in the context of QuanTour, more and better single photons.
More single photons and better single photons with the QuanTour quantum light source that will be coming to you.
Exactly.
I'm going to ask you something which I will cut out if you're not comfortable with. And that is, what do you think about Trump coming into power in the US? Do you think this will have an effect on the research or the funding in a global sense? Because anything that happens in the US does have an influence. And the last time Trump became president, he cut the science budget substantially. And we seem to have this right-wing sort of political agendas are emerging in different parts of the world as well, different countries as well. So if you want to share that, if you don't want to share that, that's I completely understand. But I just to like take the focus out of the Netherlands and just do more general because everyone is talking about Trump and his shit. So if you say, Wolfgang, no, that's fine.
Yeah, so I think it is very important also to see how things and why things are happening. So this is where the internet media also play really a significant role, and disinformation, how populists gain power, be it in the US or be it in Europe, in particular the Netherlands. And so I think it is very important, and this is also an important mission of me, that we have to restore trust into scientific research, proper research in the public. And people seem to have lost the ability to recognize fiction with all the social media things, that there's a lot of fiction. We had science fiction in my youth. It was totally clear, beautiful things that is completely crazy. But, and some people couldn't realize also this boundary between it. But now, because there's so much, apparently, I, of course, don't consume that, out there that makes people wonder about things where you have to trust your doctor. You risk your life if you don't trust your doctor. That most people still realize, but also with science, trust us. We work by trying to be rigorous and understanding things. So that is very important, I think, about that. Science funding is in jeopardy with these narrow-minded populistic governments, of course, because most have no plan whatsoever for a longer future, be it in the US or be in the Netherlands. And therefore, I will go on a demonstration in half an hour, actually. Therefore, we have to stop here in Leiden, where we also have the same issue. There's a government which makes a significant budget cuts for education and research. And it's demolishing the future. I think there's much other things one should make budget cuts before in education mainly. I actually even agree first kids, then teens, and then later in the food chain should come fundamental research. It's most important that education at schools is funded enough. But also to end with something positive, we've seen we survived quite a bit in the past 5 years, what we've done, not only Trump, but also other things. Humans are very flexible animals. And I have trust that humanity will somehow survive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Education, fundamental research, and also the good point that you mentioned there is the return on investment on the fundamental research or any sort of research, scientific research, in the best interest of any region or country or state or whatsoever to do that, because you're going to see the return on investment is 6 to 10 fold almost.
Yeah, that is just the economic revenue that you can see, and but the societal revenue is extremely hard to measure. I'm actually organizing a sub-conference in January next year to try to work a little bit towards figuring out the questions with experts in this field. I am not, of course, because I trust other experts on these things. Same story, and this is very hard to measure. But what I always say is, we need to come up with new things which excite people. I mean, just thinking what amazing abilities smartphones have enabled, and people need new things to be happy. apparently. And
Definitely. So I can't grant all three of your wishes, but I'm sure you will have more time, more funding, or more just better infrastructure. Let's just go with better infrastructure for research, for you, for your team, for the emerging scientists, for kids, for the society in general. Let's just put that out there. And I believe that you have more power to make your wishes come true than I have, but I'm more than happy to help.
thank you.
This has been great, Wolfgang. But before I let you go, I have one last question for you, and that is about your time on the Blue Sky account of Under the Microscope podcast, which is essentially every guest on the Under the Microscope podcast gets to curate and post from this account for one entire week, from Monday to Sunday. So when you and your team will be taking over the Under the Microscope account on Blue Sky, what can the followers expect?
You will get a look into a Leiden lab. So that is, of course, the main point also, that we will show you how we do things in Leiden. This will be a bit different than at other places. But then I hope to take you also on a journey on other projects. For instance, one thing what we do with the single photons. There's one project to figure out where you are. So for instance, how do I know to whom I'm talking with really? That is actually a question which is crucial in the internet. Right now, we trust this little green button on the URL bar. And this is based on classical cryptographic schemes. It's amazing that this works so amazingly well. And we are exploring one potential future added layer of security there that we prove positioned by triangulation. You might know that the satellites which do enable GPS on the telephone, there's also nothing else than sending photons, microwave photons around. But it turns out to really prove that somebody is at a certain location. We need quantum mechanics. And we worked out in the past years protocols and experiments with this. And I will show you a bit how these single photons coming out of the QuanTour source can be used for that. So that is one of the side tracks that we are doing. And then we'll also show you probably some other fascinating topics of light and photons.
That's going to be great. And the cryostats and the campers and the labs and the city. And
exactly. And we have the machine of Commoning Honors who for the first time made helium liquid standing here in the basement of my lab. We will see.
Oh, wow. Cannot wait to have you on the Blue Sky account as well. Looking forward to having you now. There is just so much that is coming up. So thank you very much for speaking with me, Wolfgang. This was really great, and I am definitely going to visit your lab at some point.
Thank you very much for having me, and you are more than welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you are not following the podcast Under the Microscope already, please do wherever you're listening right now. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe to it. If you're listening to Under the Microscope on Apple Podcasts, feel free to leave a review. That would be wonderful. If you're listening on Spotify, do share in the comments. How did you like this episode? What were your key takeaways? And please do follow Under the Microscope everywhere. This is absolutely for free for you, and it means the world to me, and it enables me in bringing more and more amazing guests to you. We have big plans for season 7. Thank you, and see you in the next one.